Since the very beginning, when I started out making music, I've always been on the lookout for the perfect live audio looper. I've tried many over the years, from dedicated guitar pedals like the Boss RC300 and TC Electronics Ditto, to loopers on more complex machines like the MPC, the Octatrack, and the Deluge. I even tried live audio looping on Ableton with the Push 2. However, none of these seemed to really fit the bill for me. Today though, I'm very excited because I finally got my hands on something that has completely revitalized my musical creativity, and that has had me grinning like an idiot for days on end. This is the Aeros Loop Studio. And in this video, I want to tell you why this thing has made me happy ever since I first turned it on. If you're one of the 12,500 amazing people who have already subscribed to this channel, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for your continued support. You truly rock, and you are what makes this whole channel even possible. If this is your first time here, hi, welcome to the Midlifesynthesist. Let's get started. So just to recap, I have seen my fair share of loopers over the years. Guitar pedal style loopers are generally easy to find and are not that expensive, and they are a pretty good alternative to anyone who's just starting out in the amazing world that is live audio looping. My main issue with these kinds of pedals is that they generally feel pretty limited in terms of how many individual tracks you get. Also, you get very little visual feedback, or sometimes none at all. However, I wanted something a bit more fully featured, so to speak, so I went in search of something a bit fancier. Enter the Aeros Loop Studio. Now this is the looper that I was waiting for. The looper that pretty much just does one thing, but it does it extremely well. You don't have any audio mangling capabilities here, neither do you have a whole roster of effects to choose from, but that also means that you have almost no menu diving, just the initial setup, and that's it. You also don't just get a few measly tracks like on the RC300, nor virtually infinite tracks like on the Deluge or the Push either. You do get to choose whether you want 2 loop tracks or 6, and that's it. It's just enough tracks to get a complete set of musical ideas cooking and the creative juices flowing, but not so many tracks that it feels overwhelming, or that the mix gets bogged down and muddied up by having too many things playing on top of each other. Now that by itself would not make this such a unique pedal, but where the Aeros Loop Studio really shines and leaves the competition in the dust is in its user interface. And in the case of the Aeros, it's honestly one of the best I've seen. To start things off, first time you turn it on, it will automatically connect to Wi-Fi to update its firmware. After that, there's an abbreviated version of the user manual that you can access directly on the device's screen. After some quite enjoyable and light manual reading and a bit of practice, I already felt confident in my control of the device. The reason it feels so easy to use is the way things are set up. By the clever use of both physical controls and a very capable touchscreen, you get the best of both worlds, and it sort of reminds me of a modern day MPC in that sense. Where it does outshine the MPC though, is that after that initial setup, you could pretty much perform your entire song without ever touching the screen again. Since it's made to be used on the floor with your feet, the whole thing is controlled in its entirety by pressing, double pressing, or holding one of the stomp buttons on the front panel, or rolling the little wheel on the side. Using those buttons, you can record, overdub, and play a track, as well as select a new track, new tracks, and trigger different parts of the song, which I'll get to in a second. And while we're still on the hardware side of things, let me just say that since this thing was clearly made for floor duties, this thing is built like a tank, and it feels rock solid, but also premium and fancy, for lack of a better word. Now, that could have been all that the Aeros had to offer, and I already would think it was an amazing looper. However, it does have a few more tricks up its sleeve that, at least to me, make it pretty much a must-buy for anyone who is serious about getting into live looping. By the way, if you're enjoying this video, I would really appreciate it if you could take a second, click that like button, and maybe leave me a comment telling me what your favorite pedal is, because it helps the channel grow and I really like being here. Thanks. Now, anyone who has ever tried their hand at making a song has probably gotten stuck in loop limbo at some point. Now, that's when you have about 4 bars of amazing music, but that it only works as a loop, and you have no idea how the hell to get out of that and advance the song. This is especially easy to get stuck into when you're using a looper pedal, as you usually have to work by overdubbing and erasing and muting tracks over the same loop that plays over and over. However, the Aeros Loop Station has an easy way out of this, with the ability of recording and dividing your tracks into different selectable parts. You can think of these parts as equivalent to sequences on the MPC or patterns on Electron boxes. You can have up to 6 completely independent parts for your song in the 6x6 mode, and this comes in extremely handy in songwriting as you can structure your parts as, for example, an intro, a verse, and a chorus. You can toggle between these tracks freely while you're performing, and you can also lock tracks, so when you change between the parts, these tracks will spill over and keep playing from one part to another. What you end up with is something similar to a simplified version of the scenes in Ableton, and at least to me, it is a powerful and incredibly fun way to try out different ideas and flesh out new music. Now, the second thing that I love about the Aeros is that it has both internal storage and the ability to record your work into an SD card. That enables you to grab your tracks and export them into a DAW like Ableton later on for further polishing and getting you that much closer to a finished song. That same capability is the reason why I love my Zoom L12 mixer so much. And speaking of the Zoom L12, I found that using the mixer with the Aeros is definitely the way to go. You see, for all its powerful looping capability, this thing is painfully low on audio inputs, and if there is one thing that I could ask for to make this thing better, or maybe if they ever make a pro version, would be a few more audio jacks, and maybe even a dedicated mic input with phantom power. However, as is, I'm having the most fun with the Aeros by hooking up the main stereo output of my mixer into the stereo inputs of the Aero. So then, the Aero basically gets the feed from all of my synths, and I can just loop whatever I want. Aside from the main stereo inputs and outputs, you also get an auxiliary input and output. A small warning regarding that auxiliary output is that the volume on it is extremely low, and you will need some sort of preamp to get any usable audio out of it, especially in a live situation. As far as MIDI goes, this thing has full 5-pin MIDI in and out, and it can be set to receive external clock, which makes it much more useful than the RC300 for my kind of setup. And as a side note, since its release, the Aeros has received a bunch of firmware updates, which have significantly increased its functionality. So hats off to Singular Sound for the customer support. As far as price goes, at $699, it's not exactly a cheap pedal, but I will say that it certainly feels premium and it is an absolute joy to work with. Looper pedals come in many forms, shapes, and sizes, and I honestly think that everyone should toy around with one at some point at least, because for me, they make music composition fast and fun. That being said, the key point in a looper is that it doesn't get in the way of your creativity and allows you to easily get in the flow, and the Aeros is just that. If you're looking for a powerful, straightforward, and just plain old fun-ass looper pedal that you can really just go nuts on, this is the one, and it gets my full recommendation. Now, for complete transparency, Singular Sound are not sponsoring this video. I bought this unit with my own money, and if I sound excited about it, it's because I really am. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful, or at least entertaining. I hope you have a great week. I'll see you in the next one.